feel like this game was pretty even in the beginning, but I think the Niners just kept grinding away, and keep putting pressure on Jalen Hurts. Right, they really stopped his ability to be effective in terms of the rushing game, but also his ability to find his receivers. Right now, like it's not like he played a bad game. He actually had a pretty good game. He threw for 298 yards. AJ Brown had 114 yards receiving. Devontae Smith had 96 yards receiving. I mean, if you look at those stats, right, like honestly, you look at those stats, you could equate that to like if you just see that on paper, like, oh, the Eagles won, right? But I mean, the Niners this game, they just like poured it on, and also on the Niners drives, they were able to come away with touchdowns, but then you look at the Eagles drives, especially, I think the tide started to change a little bit when you started noticing the Eagles were having to settle for field goals. They weren't executing in the same way as the Niners were, right? The Niners were getting touchdowns, and they were just putting points up, and they were getting significant points up, and significant like pressure on the plays, but also just a lot of production. If you want to look at the Niners, and I think, to take a second here and talk about the Niners, I thought Brock Purdy was really good. He was awesome. I thought basically on all facets of the game, the Niners, the rushing game, the receiving, I mean, Niners just did all around an incredible job in this one. I think, McCaffrey rushed for 93 yards. Debo came up with some really good plays. Debo had a rushing touchdown. Debo also had 2 touchdown catches. I mean, Kittle was really effective out there. Ayuk was effective out there. I mean, look, like personally, I feel like even though they wouldn't want to admit it, I think the Niners needed to win this game to make up for that loss in the playoffs, right? And I know it's in the past and all that stuff, but like, I think just getting over that mental hump, or just in your head thinking, oh man, like I wish we could play the Eagles over again and do that over where no one gets hurt like they did in the playoffs. And like I think sometimes when you play games where you just kind of, it is regular season, it's not the playoffs, and it's not like nothing's really on the line in a sense here. But I think it's just that boost of confidence to know like, hey, we're facing the Eagles, we're facing Jalen Hurts, and we destroyed them, and they ran the ball all over the Eagles. And I thought that was really, really a big part of their success in this game. But I think from a confidence, perspective, I think that they really, they just handedly beat the one of the teams that was in the Super Bowl, and this kind of proves to them and reinforces for them like, hey, like they are not just in the conversation. I think they are the conversation in a sense, right? Like Niners are the team to beat, I think. And then there's a handful. You can talk about your Dallases and things like that. And the Eagles are still really good. I'm not really worried about the Eagles. But just the way the Niners won this game, I thought was a big statement game. And I think too, like, I don't know where a lot of people are coming from when it comes to Brock Purdy, or should I say, I don't know why they keep doubting him in this sense here. Like, I think, I hear a lot of people trying to make him out to be not as good as he is, right? Like, and you definitely can't discount the effectiveness or like the team he has around him, right? Of course, right? If you have McCaffrey, you have Debo, you have Ayuk, you have Kittle, I'm missing a bunch of guys too, but like, you have a lot of players, and you have Kyle Shanahan calling the plays there and his schemes and all this stuff. Of course, you're going to have a lot of success, but like for people to think that just because Brock Purdy is in the system that he's in makes him a good quarterback, I don't think is correct. I think he is a good, really great quarterback in and himself, but being put into the system, I think he's perfect fit for this system, and that those two things together, kind of elevates him to where he's at right now. And again, like I heard Michael Lombardi say on his podcast, it's like, what more does he have to do? And I kind of agree. Like he threw for 314 yards, 4 touchdowns. Like what more does he have to do for people to kind of consider him? Like he's not that like 7th round draft pick anymore or whatever, right? Like I don't think he's Mr. Irrelevant anymore. I think he is, what he's shown on the field. And yeah, a couple of games this year he kind of had a slip ups a couple of games, but like for the most part, you look at how he's played, even dating back to last year before he got hurt in the playoffs, like unbelievable, right? I think it's unbelievable. So I just don't think that it's just because of the players. I think there is a really like a real thing with Brock Purdy, and also the guys love him. The guys, and I think that's the most important thing too, is the guys on that team believe in him. And you had Garoppolo there, you had Trey Lance there, and that didn't work out. So I think it's one of those one of those things where personally I'm a big fan of Brock Purdy. I think he deserves much, much more credit than he's given. But that's I think he still has a lot to prove, and he's a really good dude that will keeps things into perspective, and he kind of just focus on the game. But overall, I think that his demeanor is really awesome. He has such a calm demeanor about him. Doesn't get riled up really, and he doesn't get too low. Not too high, not too low, and I think that's really perfect for this team. Just especially the kind of leader that this team needs. And moving forward, you look at the Niners, and they have a pretty favorable schedule for them, right? I mean, maybe just outside of just the Ravens, I think the rest of the teams, it looks like they can kind of go 4-1. I mean they could beat the Ravens too, but like if there was one team I think they would fall to, in my opinion, it would be the Ravens, and they can just kind of build up on that momentum into the playoffs there. So it's funny how like that really helped them. It really helped them out after losing three in a row. I think there's a bye week that helped them out, and a lot of people thought during that period of time, again, like when they were struggling, that the Brock Purdy magic was over, right? But after these past 2 games or 3 or 4 games or whatever, the Niners are back on track to being who they were last year and who I think everyone thinks they are, and I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. So I think they're on a good track here. As for the Eagles, they have a pretty, rough road ahead. Well, I don't say rough road, but they have important games coming up, and the Cowboys, that game I think is a huge game for them, and I think that's like a litmus test also. I think they have these two games in a row, right, where it's a big test of the kind of team they are. And we'll see. And also what kind of team the Cowboys are, right? Because I think the narrative on the Cowboys here is like the Cowboys can beat up on teams that are worse than them, but when it comes to teams that are good, they kind of get schmacked a little bit. But it's and I think they're running a bit into a tough situation now because you're going up against the Eagles team. The Cowboys are going up against an Eagles team that probably a little pissed off and probably want some revenge here. So and come back from a tough loss here. Even though again, I don't think the Eagles played terribly. I think it was just the execution, and because you look at the stat sheet, and then again, the game's not played on stat sheet, but you just look at it, and it's an indicator that they weren't terrible, right? Jalen Hurts still threw for a lot, and there were a lot of good things that happened. It's just they couldn't really get in the end zone as much as I think they would want to. But then after the Cowboys, they have the Seahawks, and they have to be careful there. I think the Seahawks, don't take them too lightly. I think the Seahawks still have a lot to play for. I think they're still in the hunt here. Never underestimate Pete Carroll. That's something that the Seahawks can kind of sneak up on you there. You almost be like a trap game, but they have that coming up, and then they have the Giants twice, and so those games are always exciting. Eagles Giants is always a fun little rivalry there, and then they have the Cards in the middle of that, so which could be a toss up, right? I mean, if Kyler plays well over there, but I think overall, I think the Eagles will be fine. I don't really see this game as something that's going to bring them down or whatever, especially after we have the Cowboys coming up. They just have to move forward and kind of look towards that. But again, too, like I don't really have any concerns about the Cowboys or the Eagles. Really, honestly, the Cowboys, Eagles, or the Niners. Like I don't have any concerns about any of them. I think now, for me, those 3 teams, unless they have a really bad outing, unless any of those teams have a really bad outing towards the end of the season here, I just feel like those 3 teams are really going to head into the playoffs with a lot of momentum. So the Eagles-Cowboys game, fun game to watch, maybe game of the week there. But overall, the Eagles and Niners game, or the Eagles and Niners I think they might meet again. There's a good chance they can meet again, maybe. But it should be interesting to see what happens if they do match up again, to see how the Eagles move forward and move on from this loss. I think I think they'll be fine again. And the Niners on the other side of it, I think they're riding the momentum right now, right? And I think the best thing they can do for themselves is just stay healthy, keep continuing this, keep pushing forward in the postseason. And I think both these teams are going to be really good ones to look out for in the postseason.